Take one. Action.
What do you think about propaganda in war?
It's bad, but I guess you mean examples of it? Like, I know plenty of examples. I used to work at a high school in Chicago, and right down the street was a military recruitment center. So one way that they do propaganda is they're right near the high schools, right? I've seen examples in Washington, D.C., in the metro, subway. All along the walls are advertisements for big military, like jets and tanks. So that's one way they use propaganda. And this morning a student sent me from university a video on YouTube that she told me it's being shown on television in the US, and it's about how it's against Iran, because now the US is making like a peace deal with Iran, but some people want war, so they make this commercial to say Iran is dangerous, we have to bomb Iran. And the television, everyone knows today that the big news networks, they say whatever the government wants them to say. So those are different examples of war propaganda.
How do you think the propaganda manipulates young's life?
Young people's?
Yeah.
Oh, when I hear students say, I want to join the army. Oh, video games and movies. Iron Man, for example, they make deals with the Pentagon to use equipment or bases for filming, like Iron Man movies and stuff. And the Pentagon says, okay, but then we have to, in order for you to get this for your film, we have to be allowed to modify the script. So they put subtle propaganda in these Iron Man movies that you watch, so you think like it's awesome to be a soldier. And video games. America's Army was an actual game created by the American Army. So they would see that young people who do good in the game, it's a sign that they could be good in real life as a soldier. So they use video games. So young people through video games and movies think it's cool to be a soldier.
Do you think young people's life can end by war?
Young people's lives?
Can end by because they go to war?
Well, depends where. Like in Mexico, well, you have the trouble with narcos. So, yeah, but not as common maybe. But in the U.S., for sure, actually more soldiers have died suicide than being killed in Afghanistan and Iraq, because it messes up your head. So.
Hello. What do you think about war propaganda?
War propaganda, I think it's a tool that governments use to convince people that a war is just and that the population needs to rise up and do whatever the government asks them to in order to win the war. I think it's necessary in some cases, but of course every government manipulates its citizens, so you always have to be careful about that.
What do you think it needs to have to manipulate young citizens?
The propaganda, what does it have to include to... Well, the easiest way is your love of country. So if the propaganda says that your way of life, your loved ones, or your land where you live is going to be changed due to this war, and that if you don't do something about it, it will be your fault, well, of course you're going to do whatever you can to not make that happen, right? I mean, if people are going to come and burn your house down and rape your mother and your sister or enslave you, well, that's very good motivation to fight and die for whatever cause you need to. Whether it's true or not is another thing. Remember, this is all propaganda to get someone to believe your cause.
And well, the final question is not their life. Well, their life, how does it change?
I was saying that it's very easy for a 20-something to believe what the government says because they've been educated to believe the government. But it says it, it's war propaganda. Propaganda is another word for advertising. And so when you actually are in a war, when you're facing those bullets and the guns and the death that is war, you're going to see that it's not worth it. First, the other people on the other side are in the same situation you are in. And second, dying isn't all it's cracked up to be, you know? So obviously it's a big disillusionment because what the government told you, you find out is not true.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hello. What do you think about war propaganda in general?
War propaganda is brainwashing. They wash your brain in order for you to do what they want or to buy what they want you to buy, to make the economy as strong as possible to win the war.
What do you think about it impacts in a young soldier, well, a young citizen? How do you think it impacts?
It does impact because it has worked for years. Now, it has changed through years now because you see at the beginning of the 19th, 20th century, everybody was going and calling for nationalism and for patriotism, defending your motherland from the enemy, defending values like liberty and democracy. That was basically World War II. But the real thing is that it's a way to brainwash people to do whatever you want, what the system or what the apparatus wants you to do. And I think that's dangerous because people are being artificially directed towards an opinion which is not always the right one. Because if you look at for example, the Cold War. In the Cold War, when you looked at the propaganda from the West, everything was the bad guys from the communist side. And when you look at the communist propaganda, everything was the bad guys from the Western side. So who was right? Who was wrong? And basically, I think that's the bad part of it because people are being manipulated.
And when they're finally in war, how do you think a soldier life is changed? When they are in the trenches?
They want to live. The only thing they want is to live and go back in one piece.
Because propaganda is not true.
No, and because war is horrible. Especially if you talk about World War I, when they were in the trenches, I mean, it was horrible. Think about the fact that in Europe there is a lot of rain and it's very cold. Imagine living in these conditions of humidity. And
it's not human.
No, it's not. They said it was going to be the last war. That's why they called World War I La Terre de Terre, which means the last of the last. Mm-hmm. Was it the last war in history? I don't think so.
Okay. Any other comment you want to say about?
Yeah, I think it's important when you're young to think by yourself and to inform yourself with different sources because it's very easy to fall in a system. Look, for example, Nazi Germany. I mean, they brainwashed their young people from a very young age with the Hitlerjugend. I mean, they were so fanatic. I mean, they would die for their ideals. And even today, these people are still thinking that they were right. And I think this is very dangerous.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome so much.
Thank you.
Take care.